Hello, and welcome to this, I suppose, devlog for floating city game name pending. Uh, I would, I figured that this would be a cool idea to sort of do, was to just show you the creation process of these games. I figure I don't really have much to lose. The only issue is I tend to do all of these things like on a whim, like when I'm inspired, I just push it all out. Uh, right? But I figured, I think it's worth just slowing down a bit and actually recording the process and trying to make a game with you lot, if you're interested, of course, right? Um, I don't know how interesting of a video series this will be, but I'll see where it goes once this mini series is finished. So first and foremost, this is called Floating City Game. It's definitely not the final title. But if you would like to vote on a name and the not description, but the comments section, then at some point we can try and figure out what a good name for this game will be. Uh, but yeah, this is just going to sort of overview how I create games and hopefully create a cool game that you'll be able to order just when this is finished. The main thing that takes time in game design is actually the art. Doing the art for these games is like I have like 10 different games that I'm working on right now. They're all pretty much finished. The only thing they're waiting on is art. Art is the number one thing that holds a project back in terms of time and also in terms of sales. I think the more polished your game is, uh, the more people will uh, be gravitated towards it. And I could do something like AI art, which is just objectively better looking than what I'm doing. And yeah, some people don't like AI art, but some people do. I think most people dislike it though, so it's more of a net negative. But it does look really nice compared to the stuff that I'm doing. But I'd prefer just not to deal with that type of thing, at least for now. Obviously, in the future, when AI becomes equivalent in intelligence to humans, I really don't think it's smart to treat them as inferior. It's if they can think as well as humans, then they should probably be treated as such. But that's sort of a topic for another time. But these AI arts, I don't know if I like them too much. Just like obviously they're objectively better than the stuff I'm doing, but for the time being, I'm just not going to touch them. So, anyways, uh, regardless, I'm going to go ahead and go through this little list of things. This is just here so that I'm able to sort of explain to you the starting point of this floating city game. So, what I tend to do is I have a list of inspirations of things that inspire me to make the game, and these are all like going to become core mechanics that will be implemented into the game. Actually, for the most part, most of these are going to be sort of culled as the game takes form. These will become less and less relevant. Um, so, like there are some really interesting ideas that I really want to fit in, like Soaring Emblem from Soaring Arcana. Like Soaring Arcana is a failed game that I tried to make. Like it had so many cool ideas, but unfortunately the game just didn't work because of uh, one of the core mechanics, like how you actually won the game. It's variable, and I think it's really interesting, but unfortunately, it really sucks. Like it sucks to play. Like it has so many cool mechanics, but it truly sucks to play, unfortunately. But there's this really cool mechanic, the Soaring Emblem, which I'll get into when I go through this list. But I've tried to this is such a cool mechanic. I'm trying to implement it into every game I make, but it never makes it in because it's just so hard to slot in. So a lot of these are just like sort of blueprints. These sort of inspire me. Like for example, Armies from the Imposter Kings board game, or I guess card game, is really a unique mechanic and it's really cool. but I don't know if it actually make it into the final product, exactly like they have the armies, or if it'll even make it into the final product, period. So these are sort of my inspirations. This is, of course, a large list, but for example, something like Stikeout actually only had one inspiration, or me and my friend during art class were just like screwing about. He made these little artist trading cards with fishes on them, and it was about a fishman living through his life. The first thing was his grandpa going off to war, then his grandpa passing away, and then he became depressed. Uh, saddening. But the thing that really inspired me when we were sort of screwing around is like, I played this in an offense position, and I played this in defense position. And then he said, okay, I played this card, it's love, and it makes you discard all the evil cards in your hand. And that mechanic alone, the idea that love discards all of one type of card from your hand, all of the evil cards in your hand, really like inspired me to make all of Stikeout. Like all of Stikeout is based off of that singular concept. Of course, I wanted love to be good, so I wanted discarding evil cards to be a good thing. So now, essentially, the reason why your life points or your life total is equal to the amount of cards in your hand. Like when you run out of cards, you lose the game. The reason why is because I wanted love to be a really beneficial card where you're removing all of the evil cards with their hand. That's a heavy hitter, right? It'll swing the game heavily in your favor. But then why would you ever want evil cards, right? If all evil cards did was get discarded, that would be detrimental. Well, how about this? Evil cards are stronger than normal cards, but of course they have this great weakness in that of love. So, the entire game of Stikeout came from that singular inspiration. Now, recently I've have these longer lists of inspirations. So just for this first video, I'm going to go through each of these inspirations and just explain to you what I think this game will sort of look like by the end of it. So yeah, I guess let's just get started. So this first point here, this one, I sort of developed myself. Again, some of these are from my own games, like Soaring Arcana. Some of them are from other games, like Civilization 6 or Sea Vardis. And some of them are just ideas that I came up with myself. Obviously, some other person might have come up with this. Realistically, about 1 million other people have thought this same exact idea. There's no way that when you come up with something, it's probably been come up with before. Odds are that it has. So, nothing's truly original and creative, but as far as I'm aware, this is, my own idea. So, the idea for this specific idea, the idea of this idea. So, what's working behind it is essentially there are 100 citizens total, right? And you and your other players are going to be trying to swing these citizens to your favor. So you might have, I'm just going to go to the back here, ignore that, we're using the same paper. But if you, let's say, have 100 citizens total, you might try and swing over 20 people to your side, and your opponent might try and swing 20 people to their side. And then you'd be able to, and that of course would decrease the pool down to 60. And then you would be able to be like, okay, I want this guy to decrease some amount. So now 10 gets added back to the center pool. And now they only have 10. Or, okay, I'll swing some more of these guys to my side. So now I have 30 and now there's only 60 in the pool. And that's sort of the idea about it, is that there's this fixed amount of people in the pool. It's very zero sum and you're swinging things from person to person. Now, you could even sort of compare it to Oath, where you have a fixed amount of favor in the game. What they do, which I think is really interesting, is it's very easy to burn favor where it's no longer in the game. So it's not necessarily zero sum as it is more so negative sum game, which is super interesting. So I'm thinking that taking some inspiration from Oath as well, perhaps you can kill off citizens and it would lower the pool of people that you can play with. But it would greatly give you some sort of good benefit, right, to assassinate someone. I think it's a really interesting idea, and if I'm sure none of you thought this, but if you know how to play Cellular Powerhouse, you might think, hey, isn't that mechanic sort of similar to your gaining/losing dice mechanic in Cellular Powerhouse? And the answer is yes. I've actually used this same idea for several different games. So Cellular Powerhouse, of course, doesn't have citizens, but its dice mechanic is about, hey, I'm going to take X amount of dice from this communal pool in the center. Hey, I'm going to take some of yours and put them back into the center and take some for myself. So this idea of a shared pool that you're fetching and then sending back, this sort of shared reserve, is sort of just an idea that I've been playing with for a while. And this should help you understand that these ideas can apply to multiple games, can be applied in several different ways. So these are, again, more inspirations than anything. So these are not hard guidelines. So that's sort of where I'm standing on this. I think it's really interesting. I've been wanting to implement it, but the main issue that I'm just thinking about it, right? 100 citizens total is sort of absurd. For example, this isn't all of the gems. You get a little bit more gems from Color Factory, but it's a lot of material. It costs a lot of money. You could go for cardboard, but cardboard's actually more expensive than these plastic things. But that's kind of besides the point. Yeah, it'd be really hard to actually get 100 tokens and make them actually visible to who owns them. I suppose, the way I was thinking about this is that these citizens would be on the board. I could treat it more like Oath, actually, and make it more like a favor system where it's not necessarily citizens in the floating city, but rather it's their favor that you're switching around, or perhaps they are your workers and your workers in your reserve, and you spend them like they're a currency. That is also a possibility, but I don't know. It's sort of a weird scenario, sort of a weird situation. Another part of this that isn't listed here is I also wanted it so that you could create loyal citizens. So if you take a look at this back over here, you might be able to say, hey, I want these 30, I want 5 of them to become super loyal. They will never switch into the center. They will never switch to another player. These are loyal to me forever and ever. So I also want that to be sort of a mechanic, and it's really hard to get all of that through, these little gems or cardboard tokens. So the unfortunate issue with this one is just material-wise, that's a really hard ask. But I think if I were to switch over to a more Oath type system with favor, it would probably work out well, or treat them as workers or something like that. Speaking of Oath, just side tangent, man, I love the suits mechanic in that game. If you've ever seen it, if you haven't seen it, then whatever, it's fine. But some people don't like the suits mechanic. I really like it, but I'm definitely not implementing it into any of my other games. That's a really complex mechanic. That's really thematic, but it's really clunky as well. But it's really nice. I do really like it. Oath might be actually my favorite game of all time, but that's sort of up in the air. Depends on the day, I think. It's hard to say what your favorite game is, right? So another thing that I have here, the second thing on this list, is Action Lockout. So the main inspiration for this, and you'll see that some of these have parentheses, C, X, and X. See the initiative. There's this game called The Initiative. It's really cool. Essentially, you play cards in values. Let me go ahead and just pull out some cards from A Rogue on the High Seas real quick. So, for example, you'll be dealt a hand of cards, something like this. And your fellow players are also dealt hands of cards. And there's going to be actions. Let's just treat these, this shark man, this fat dude, and this lady as actions. So you would be able to be like, okay, I want to take this action, and you would do that action. And now your opponent, or I suppose in the initiative, it's a cooperative game. So you would be your fellow compatriots would be like, hey, I'll do this action, and then you switch back and forth. But the thing is, the reason why you're playing to these is, of course, to signify which action you're taking, but also you can't play something that's lower onto this action. For example, I cannot do the shark action with this 6 because there's already a 10 on there. So I can only play a card of higher value in order to do that action, which is a really interesting idea. So you're essentially locking people out of things in order to do, well, these actions. And in the initiative, it's really interesting because it's a cooperative game. So you have to really hope that other players have higher value cards than you do. And it's really a huge push and pull. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten to play the initiative. A lot of these are actually just from me watching like Shut Up and Sit Down reviews or other board game reviews, simply because I don't own the games, and also I don't have anyone who I would actually play the games with. I have a hard enough time getting people to play test my own games. I'm not going to be able to play like these other games with other people, unfortunately. Simply not enough time, and also again, hard enough time trying to get people to play my own games. So anyways, that's sort of the idea behind Action Lockout. Now, I do want the floating city game to be a competitive game. I don't really want it to be cooperative. Nothing really against cooperative games. It's just that I wanted to make something competitive. I want you to essentially, in this floating city, be working together to make the city better, yes, but also you want to get ahead of everyone else, classic capitalism. So what this is Action Lockout, right? If you do an action, if you put in, let's say, the highest value, a 20, you're completely locking that action off from all other players. So this little tenant here, right after that's not actually from the initiative. This is my own sort of spin on it so that it makes more sense in a competitive setting. So instead of it being like 1 through 20, your cards are labeled 1 through 4, and everyone has these 1 through 4 cards. But in order to play a card to an action, it would cost you some sort of resource cost equivalent to their value. So if you were to play a 4 onto, bringing back the Sharkman, sorry, I already put it away, but if you were to play a 4 to the Sharkman, it would cost you like, let's say, 4 gold. And of course, no one else can do that action, so that's really good. But you could have done that action for 1 gold. So it's more beneficial to go lower. But if you go lower, then other people are able to do that action still, of course, if they pay a little bit of a higher price. So I really like this sort of thing. So you have a little bit of a push and pull. It's like I'm saying over here, it's an action lockout. And I think that's a pretty apt description of that. This next point here is mutual benefit politics. I kind of went into this before, but essentially the idea is you are helping build this city together. So you're working together. So the MTG Commander politics, if you ever played Magic the Gathering Commander, there's several cards there that say, hey, you and another player of your choice draw a card. And that's really cool because let's say there's 4 people when you're playing Commander, there's 4 people. You get to choose another player and both of you draw a card. That's huge. Like you levy that heavily in politicking. You can say, hey, if you do this for me, I'll let you draw a card. Or hey, if you don't do this, then I'll give you a card. And there's a ton of different interactions like that. So ideally in this game, every single action you do affects another player as well as yourself. So that benefits everyone. And another idea of this is when you harm someone in Commander, it actually benefits the other 2 people. So if there was, let's say, a big threat, big scary guy, rawr, I know, very scary, and you're able to deal with that and eliminate them, the other 2 players at the table, these are them, this is you, and this is your opponent with this guy. He controls this. You spend resources to eliminate this. These guys spent no resources, but still get their threat eliminated, which is huge. So actually targeting a single person, a single thing to remove actually benefits these 2 more than it benefits you. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics with this whole MTG politicking thing. So that's the idea between this mutual benefit politics. And the Flamecraft, if you've ever heard of that, is whenever you go to a location, you actually just benefit that location. From that point forward, everyone gains more from that location. So let's say to start with, there is a like bakery, and the bakery, when you go to the bakery, they give you 1 red gem. Well, let's say you go there, and now you put in your own white gem in there. Now, whenever someone goes there, they're going to get a red gem and a white gem. So then someone goes there, they get a red, a white, and then let's say they put in their own red gem. So now this location is permanently better for everybody. So this is sort of what I mean by mutual benefit politics. You're building up the entire city together. Of course, you're trying to make it beneficial for yourself. And a really nice thing about mutual benefit politics, especially in the way that I described with the MTG, is it's really self-balancing. So I think that sucks, is when someone's left behind and they're almost like guaranteed to lose and they're just tagging along. You really don't want that as a designer, because it's just not fun to be that person. So in games like Mario Kart, which is a classic example, those in the back get a lot stronger power-ups that help them get back ahead. So in fact, it's to the point where pro players, if that's really a thing, but those who are experts at Mario Kart will actually stay in the back so that they can get the power-ups and take the lead at the very end. So this self-balancing thing, this really works out, because you as the person who's going to say, hey, you and I, we're both going to draw a card. You're not going to give that to someone who's winning, because you're just going to make them win more. So you're actually going to choose a person who's in the losing position and make them draw a card along with you. And it's not because you're a good person and you want to help them out, though it might be that. But the main reason is because you don't want this other guy to win. So you're trying to prevent them from winning by you're forced to help someone. So you're helping the person who's in the worst position, because that's going to do the least to harm you. So this is a really big point that I really want to drive home. This is like, if there's a core in the game, this is the core in the game. This is the core of the game, ideally. Gangs, offense to defense. So this is my offense to defense. Not to my knowledge, is a game. This is more so, I have this entire Google Docs of a bunch of ideas and inspirations, and I named them all. So the name for this little subsection is offense to defense. But the idea is essentially that each person will have, let's say, 3 gangs, right? So let's say X1, XO, and dot. And then let's say your opponent has vertical, horizontal, and multiplication. Shoot, they have the same one. Whatever. And star. How about that? Okay. So let's say these are the factions. So the idea is that on your turn, you're going to be the offender. You're going to choose one of your gangs, one of your factions, and make them attack an opponent's faction. Let's get this X to attack this minus. Okay, now whoever wins, well, first and foremost, this guy is like essentially performing a siege. The minus player is essentially defending their castle, and I know, beautiful, isn't it? They're essentially defending their castle, so they get some sort of advantage, but the offender also gets an advantage in the fact that they have initiative. They're going to be trying to strike, and all they have to do is destroy like these buildings and stuff, or whatever, in whatever case. Essentially, I want it so you have like 3 sets of what I'm thinking like small decks of cards, and you're essentially battling them, trying to eliminate these other opposing gangs. And if you successfully eliminate it, then they're gone. If you lose the offense battle, you might get a huge detriment to your own gang, but you won't actually lose that guy. So it's a lot better to be on offense than defense. But again, keep in mind that if we are doing the Magic the Gathering politicking, doing single removal is actually beneficial to the rest of the table as well. So there's a lot of different politicking you can do. You can choose which gang you want to attack with, which gang you're going to attack, and of course, which player owns what. Also, just taking a little bit of a step back here, I do want this game to be ideally like 1 to 6 players. Realistically, it's going to be more like 3 to 4 players, and probably not even 3 players, more so on the 4-player side, which is unfortunate. Just the way that the game is currently panning out, I'll really try to make it into a game that you can play 2 players. I think that's really important to me, that you're able to play with 2. And ideally, it should be able to accommodate for more. That's what I want to do. But at least for the time being, it's going to be bounced around sort of this, again, this core of cores. I'm going to make it bounce around 4 players. But ideally, I'll try and make it so it's accommodating of 2, 3, and hopefully 5 and 6 players as well. Okay, so next up we have Armies. So there's this game called the Imposter Gangs. It's pretty cool. You can actually check it out for free through their website. But there's this concept of armies in their expansion where you're able to essentially, I don't know how to describe this without describing the whole game. But essentially, you have 5 cards in your army that are guaranteed. And then you're able to secretly pick 3 other cards to add into your army from 6. And this is your secret army throughout your entire game. And whenever you would like, because, yeah, it's hard to describe this mechanic without going into depth of how to play Imposter Kings. But essentially, each round you're going to have a hand of cards. And then, throughout the entire game, you're going to have your secret army off to the side. Your opponent knows what 5 of those cards are, guaranteed, because they have the same 5 cards. But then there's a secret 3 cards that you get to select. And these 3 cards are chosen from among 6 special cards, but they each have their own special effect. And anytime throughout the round, you're able to exchange one of your cards in your hand in the round and exchange it from your army. You essentially remove this card from the game, and then you add in a card from your army, permanently removing it from your army. You're not able to use it in future rounds, but now that's a card in your hand, which is going to be the best fit for the situation. Of course. And of course, there's these 3 that your opponent can try to plan for, but they don't know until you use it. Once you use it, they know you don't have it. So there's a lot of like interesting interaction with this army system. And again, I can't really go into full depth into it, but just because I can't explain the entire game off the top of my head. And also this video is already dragging on pretty long anyways, but this is the core idea of it. And I think it's a really interesting mechanic. It sort of fits well with the gangs idea. So I'm going to try playing around with these ideas and try fusing them together. I think they are very complementary. So I'm going to try and make them work together. Tradable Powers. So Zuvardis is a very interesting game. And among them is each player has their own special unique power. But the trick is they can't use it. Only other people can use their powers. So they're able to trade away their powers for favors from other players. And that is a sick mechanic. And again, that kind of brings us back to this mutual benefit politics. And also just politics in general. I want this game to be as political as possible. So I want people to be making deals left and right. There's sort of a theme, like with, I just think it's really interesting when people are trying to make deals. Devil's Hold is a great example of that. Of course, Devil's Hold is too expensive for me to manufacture, so that you probably won't be seeing that game at least anytime soon. And also, it's too complicated to make into like a computer game. Fundamentally, you can change the rules. You can literally break the rules. That's a part of the game. So Devil's Hold is like a really interesting game, and it's all about making deals. I want to emphasize that more with this game. Like, I really like the making deals in Devil's Hold. I want to emphasize that even more in this game. Although Devil's Hold, you are making deals a lot. So I guess it's not necessarily that this is more emphasis. It's just that I want to re-implement that into this game. And again, you're all in this same floating city. You're all trying to work together to some extent. Obviously, you're competitive, but you're all working together to some extent. Mutual benefit politics is going to keep going back to that. So this idea of tradable powers is really huge for me. Positioning from Civ 6. So something that's really nice about Civ 6 is... Civ 6 is a video game, by the way. There's this idea of districts. So when you're playing the game, you're sort of building out your city. And you have a city center, and you have these different districts. Like, okay, this is where the market is. This is where the industrial zone is. This is where the harbor is. So there's these like big points in your city that are, pretty essential to a functioning city. And a neat thing about them is just when you put them next to each other, they just get adjacency bonuses. And the idea of just positioning to get some extra bonus, I think it's just a cool mechanic. I think it's just a cool mechanic. And actually something that I didn't really mention here is if you've ever played Chinatown. Again, I haven't really played Chinatown before, unfortunately. But Chinatown is a game where you're actually doing a lot of this positioning, and you're trying to make deals with other players in order to build up this town. It's actually kind of similar to the core of this game. Obviously, this game is going to be a lot more... it's going to be a little bit... not a little bit more complicated. A lot more complicated with this whole armies and gang system. But I think at its core, it's going to be sort of similar to Chinatown. Just thinking about the comparison now, off the top of my head. So if you've ever played Chinatown, I'm hoping something somewhat similar to that. Obviously, there's going to be plenty of differences. But if you played Chinatown, again, that might be something you want to take a look at. Or you might be like seeing a part of the core of this game. It's really trying to replicate that sort of feeling of deals. Next up is the communal action selection. So back over here, right, with these different action cards, the idea is, or at least let me talk about Race for the Galaxy for a second. In Race to the Galaxy, at the start of the round, you essentially draft what actions you're going to do. You each secretly choose one action that will guaranteed happen throughout the round. And if multiple people choose that, it's only going to happen once. So you want to figure out what your opponents are trying to do, and then you want to obviously take as many actions as possible in a single round. So you're going to try and choose something that they aren't choosing. But of course, if you need something to happen, then you really want to pick it just so that it does happen. So that's sort of the idea with this communal action selection here, is that I want what actions are available to be determined by the players. And the reason for this, there's several different things that could be unique. Again, because we're doing the action lockout system, if you have multiple of the same action, unlike in Race for the Galaxy, it's not going to become redundant, because you ideally would be able to put your action cards into any of the available action cards, right? So it's not necessarily redundant if you have the same thing as other players put out. In fact, generally, it would be best to pick the action you want, which actually might be less interesting. So I might actually cut that. But in theory, I think this is a really cool idea. It also sort of fits with the theme of your sort of leaders in the city and what you want to have happen, you're going to be focusing on making. Like if you want construction projects in this city, then that's going to be a part of the city. Like this is what's happening. You are determining what's going to happen, and you can help put your own efforts into other people's projects and try and gain favor that way among the citizens, among your own social standing and things like that. So I do think communal action selection is going to be quite interesting. I'll also have to see if it's going to be more similar to Race for the Galaxy, because again, I do think that it's unfortunate that there is redundancy when you pick the same action as another person. But the way they sort of get around it is you get a little bonus for picking the action in the first place, which is also really cool. So yeah, this one is definitely one that I'm going to be thinking about a lot. Communal action selection is really just a cool mechanic to have in general, but it also would imply that I need enough actions for it to be an interesting choice in the first place. I would think maybe 7 or 8 actions for a 4-player game, but that is also a lot of actions to think about. So yeah, I'll have to try and figure that out. Able to contribute to offense or defense of other players. So this is sort of something that not necessarily borrowed from Cosmic Encounter, but after coming up with this idea, I'm like, that's actually really similar to Cosmic Encounter. So if you've ever seen that game, essentially you're just able to help raid other civilizations, other planets, or you're able to help defend them as well. So again, there's that whole politicking thing, and I think that also works really well with this whole gang system. You're able to send your gang to help defend or to help attack, and I think that it really works out well. So that's also going to be a part of the game. Hopefully it makes it to the end. Soaring Emblem. Okay. I don't really know how to explain this without explaining a huge chunk of Soaring Arcana, but that's sort of fine. This video is going on long anyways, so I'll just spill it here. Soaring Arcana had a ton of interesting mechanics. Chief among them, your victory condition changes constantly. You have a secret objective card in front of you, and you don't necessarily know what your objective is. So one of the actions you can do, and you're only allowed to do one action per turn. Each action is very beneficial. That's important to know. Each action is huge because you have one action per turn. So one of the actions you can do is you can swap your objective for another person's objective. And what happens is you get to see your new objective. They don't get to see their new objective. So a part of the game is when you think you're about to win, you can declare victory. As an action on your turn, you can declare victory. If you declare victory, you have to reveal your objective card. And if you don't meet the objective condition, you lose the game on the spot. Or of course, if you meet it, then you win. So when you swap objectives, it's really detrimental to another player because they don't get to see their new objective. It really sets them back because they've been working towards this other objective. But in exchange for swapping, because also keep in mind, if you swap an objective, there's nothing to stop them from swapping back except for this Soaring Emblem. This is sort of my fix to people just constantly swapping back and forth. So the Soaring Emblem is a really cool mechanic. When you swap with someone, they get the Soaring Emblem. And what happens is if you have the Soaring Emblem at the start of your turn, you get 2 actions per turn, which is huge. Again, that's double the action economy. That is a ginormous swing in your favor. But you cannot swap your objective. You're locked into whatever objective you've had, and of course you just can't swap it back. So while you have the Soaring the Soaring Emblem, you can't switch it back, but you have double the action economy. That's huge. Of course, on your turn, if you don't want the Soaring Emblem, as an action, you can actually give it away to another player. So there's a huge amount of just playing around with this is huge. It's super interesting. It's one of my favorite mechanics from the game. And like I said at the start of this video, I've been trying to put it into all my other games. It just never fits. But the idea of you get double the action economy in exchange for you being set back a huge amount from your objective being swapped, and you can't switch your own objective back with someone else. It's really a huge swing back and forward at the same time. You are gaining so much by having the Soaring Emblem. And also, because Soaring Arcana isn't a 2-player game, it's multiplayer. So if someone else swapped their objective with another player, the Soaring Arcana might just be taken away from you. So there's incentive to actually just keep it, even though you can't switch back, because you get 2 actions on your turn. That's so big. But anyways, it's really a unique mechanic that I don't know if I've seen anywhere else, and I really want to implement it into one of these games one of these days, but damn, is it hard to like fit in. It's like it's such a mechanic unique to Soaring Arcana that it's really hard to separate it from the rest of the game, unfortunately. So I've tried to put it in other games, but man, it is difficult. Next up is reliable yet consistent win cons. Sort of the opposite of Soaring Arcana. But the idea is Dune War for Arrakis. Less so Civ 6, though I included that anyways. Dune War for Arrakis, if you're playing House Atreides, you essentially have 3 different victory point trackers. And your goal for the end of the game is predetermined by a card you draw at the start of the game. And the card will say, hey, you need 9 circles, you need 8 triangles, and you need 1 square. And that's the minimum you need in order to win the game. You just need 9 points in circles, 8 points in triangles, and 1 point in square minimum, and then you win the game. And I think that's really cool. So essentially, you know your opponents are just trying to get higher victory points, but you don't necessarily know which ones they're trying to tap into. We'll see if that actually makes it in, because with something like this, that's sort of an economy building game, it makes more sense for the winner to be like whoever's the richest player, right? That sort of comes with it. I don't necessarily know how this will play out. I suppose it could be like total like military favor, economic control, and I don't know, social power. I don't know, cultural power. I'm not sure, but it's just a really unique mechanic, and I think I want to try and implement it into this game if possible, though this one's a lot lower on the list. And these aren't ordered in any way, by the way. Like, again, this is third on the list, but it's the arguably most important part. But this one is sort of the most iffy one. Like, among them all, this is sort of just, I don't know, right? Foreseeable Randomness, I do want this. I don't know how I'm going to implement it again. So this one's also really like iffy. I don't know. But essentially in Valbara, you're able to see, of course, what you're shopping for. Like, so they essentially have a shop with 4 cards in that game. And then, you know, you can buy something from the shop. But something that's really cool about the game is you actually can see the next round shop. So you're actually able to see 8 cards total in the shop. Now, of course, you can't buy these ones in the back, but you can buy something from the front planning for the ones in the back. So you have some sort of foresight, right? You're able to make the best decision in the moment based on what's going to happen next. And your opponents are doing the same thing, which is just such cool design. There's this idea in game design that with input and output randomness, and this is just such a huge boost in input randomness, that it's amazing. You can make so much more interesting decisions knowing what's coming next, but you don't necessarily have choice paralysis because it's not 8 options, it's 4. It's really a nice mechanic. It's just so good because you can do what's best in the moment based on what you have and what's on the shop. But if you want, you can also just plan ahead, and it's just really well-rounded, and I really like that. So I want to try and implement it, but again, I don't know how I would implement it. But again, this is sort of like an economy building game, so it makes sense that there would be some sort of economy, some sort of buying cards or selling cards. Another thing I was considering is because it is a floating city, and I do want it to be sort of separated from the world so you can't expand outwards and outwards like in Civ 6. And also, so it's, you know, combined, sort of like Chinatown, actually. Like, this game's actually kind of similar to Chinatown now I'm thinking about it. Of course, again, a lot more complicated, a lot more mechanics, but yeah, like, I want it to be sort of tight, locked in. But since it is a floating city, it sort of makes sense that you would make landfall once in a while to restock on resources, to sell goods, to buy goods, right? So I think there could be a huge marketplace event that happens maybe once or twice during the game that help separate acts from each other. And yeah, I think it would just be really cool. And speaking about acts, we have level up through acts, see through the puts. Through the Pits is a game that I made that unfortunately I don't think is ever going to see the light of day. It has such, like, I'm patting myself on the back really hard with like Soaring Arcana and with Through the Pits, but I mean, hey, I made the games and I know what's best about them. Uh, Through the Pits is a really interesting game. Each faction has a completely different identity and they feel completely different. Like the main thing that I'm talking about here is that Through the Pits is like a gladiator type game, right? So there's 3 chapters in each game, and essentially, once someone earns enough glory, it goes to the next chapter of the game. Any of your like heroes, any of your warriors, they're called. If any of your warriors survive from one act to the next, then they level up. And most of these characters, most of these warriors, have a huge level 3 ability. If you start with them at the start of the game and they become veterans and they make it through the entire game, they become gigantic at the end of the game. So you really want to keep them alive. Of course, you want to gain early on, but there's a huge just swing for having them. So leveling up through the acts is really important. You want to keep your guys alive so they become stronger later on and provide almost game-breaking effects. And it's just, it is like a really cool concept in of itself, where your best guys that survive become hardened warriors and they become veterans, and that's really cool. Man, I think that concept originally came from Undaunted Normandy. The idea of it being acts is purely because I wanted it to be a single game experience, not like a legacy game that you see in Stalingrad. Undaunted Stalingrad, I think it was. But yeah, leveling up through the acts, I think it's a really cool mechanic. And the main draw of Through the Pits, there was a really interesting action economy thing that I don't know if it really panned out after thinking about it, but that was really interesting. But the main thing is the factions are so unique and so cool and so it's so unfortunate that it never even got play tested. Again, I have a really hard time getting people to come play test my games, unfortunately. But like, for example, there was one faction that was full of undead that would, instead of leveling up, would level down. They start at level 3, which is really strong, right? They're stronger than all the other players, so no one's going to try and fight you, but you level down. So even if people would try and avoid fighting you because you're super strong early on, but also they'd want to avoid fighting you because they don't want your guys to die. Because if they don't die, they become worse over time, meaning that they're gaining while you're losing. So like the undead in that faction is super unique. It's super cool. And then there's also the goblin, the horde. The horde, they don't have level 3 units. I mean, they do. They have 3 level 3 units, but their whole thing is that they are expendable as all hell. None of their warriors are sacred. So when one of your warriors dies, it's permanently removed from the game. The horde has has double the amount of warriors than any other faction. Of course, none of them have a level 3, but they all can go to level 2. So, and also, whenever one of their warriors dies, they get to immediately play another one. Like, they are unending. Generally, when one of your guys dies, it sucks because for the rest of the act, you're down a man. But the horde, they're never down a man. They have an unlimited horde of goblins. So, of course, they're going to just have an unlimited horde of goblins, which I think is really interesting. Or there's a different group of eldritch abominations with such grand names as Blood and Bodyworks, Sickle and Conquest, like really cool names. I know, kind of edgy, but cool names. And they have creatures that, they have the level 1 through 3, but then they also have a level 4. And the level 4, because each level becomes exponentially stronger, level 4 is game breaking and you just dominate. That's the idea. So people want to constantly be killing you because you're going to dominate if you are left unchecked. And then there are also like demons who get to deal devastating debuffs through damage against warriors. Like whenever you take damage, you would inflict a debuff. It would be a random debuff. But demons, they get to choose which debuff. And demons are just inherently stronger and deal more damage to other warriors and stuff. And then there's this idea of valor, which, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going for that game, but it's too big. So much like Devil's Hold or Starfall Corporation, it's too big to make into a sellable game. But also, again, it never got past playtesting. It never got play tested, and I sort of just lost I lost the drive for making that game. Like it has cool mechanics, and I'd actually like to revisit it in the future, but maybe make it a bit simpler. But I don't know. Yeah, whatever. It had a lot of cool mechanics, is all I'm saying. And I know that this is supposed to be about this game, but I couldn't help but gush over this game and also this game, which have so much potential, but are just dead, gone, decay, ashes to ash, dust to dust. So unfortunate. Well, anyways, that's all. Hopefully that was interesting at some point, or hopefully that was just interesting in general. I think that's where I'll end it, though. If you have any input at all into this game, that would be great, and you can just put it in the comment section below. And I know this video is going like 51 minutes long thus far, and I don't think I'm going to edit it, unfortunately, just because I have other things to do. But I think I'm going to make these videos in the future a lot shorter, and then I'll be able to edit them more easily as well. So yeah, I'll try making it more streamlined in the future. But yeah, this is just the starting point for this game, and hopefully it'll become something amazing. And I hope that bringing you guys in, I know there's probably like 0 people watching this, but if someone did watch it, hey, could be a cool game to try and work on with the community of sorts, right? So anyways, that's all. Thanks for watching. See y'all at some point.